They think that they want, clients, they think that they want to try the case. And I usually have to kind of remind them or educate them and say, listen, it's not fun being on the witness stand. You're not going to like it.
They call it a trial for a reason.
Right. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, you're really going to dislike this. This is going to be very unpleasant for you. And I usually will tell them that at the outset anyways. That's what we're here for. And we're going to minimize all that anxiety. But I want you to know that this is nobody wants to do this, right? I mean, this is terrible.
The hardest part is after the case has been presented and you're waiting for the 12 people to tell you whether you were
whether
right
they agree with
or
you or
wrong.
they don't. Yeah. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I'm your host, Justin Chopin, business owner, lawyer, dad, world's best husband, traveler, and adventure seeker. On this podcast, we mix business with pleasure. We'll dive into growth strategies, entrepreneurial adventures, the business of law, and prove that business isn't boring. So let's get ready because we are going above the legal limit. Welcome to Above the Legal Limit. I have Pete Breslin, mediator extraordinaire, former trial attorney, here with us on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, I was asked by a good friend, and I said I'll be glad to give you a hand.
Hey, I appreciate that. So what we were just talking about is mediations. You say you earned your gray hair trying cases. And some guys were making fun of my bus ads. And they said, how old is that photo? It was like the world's oldest photo of you. I was like, no, it's not. It's like it's like a few years old. And they're like, well, when did you shoot it? I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't remember. 2017. They're like, yeah, we can tell. You don't. He's like, your beard's not gray. I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea. So I guess we're due for new gray beard. I don't blame that on the practice of law. I blame that on my children.
Well, I was about to say the same thing. I have 4 kids and 12 grandkids, so I certainly understand the stress of kids.
Right. So there's a photo of me holding my newborn son, born in August of 2017, and my beard is black, very French, like a very black beard. And
do you have any teenagers?
No, he's just 7. So by the time I get to teenagers, the beard will have fallen out.
Give it time, and you'll see. So.
I'm sure. So, today's going to be different. So sometimes on the show we talk about the practice. I try to keep it's like above the legal limit. I'm not like a law nerd, so I don't can't really sit there and pontificate on the finer points of the law. Sometimes we'll do like an ethics hour. So we'll talk about like new kind of, then I can kind of nerd out a little bit. Today we're going to talk about mediations. So it's great to have you here. So how many times do you mediate in a week these days?
Well, it varies.
Okay.
I've got 10 mediations scheduled, which is going to cover the next month and a half, 2 months, and that's more than enough. As I mentioned before, I do it because I enjoy doing it.
Sure.
I'm lucky enough not to have to do it, and it's very enjoyable. I pick up a few bucks doing it, and I've been very successful, fortunately, in getting cases resolved, which is what both sides want to do.
Right. I mean, as a plaintiff's lawyer, I like mediations, of course. We don't, sometimes we resolve at mediation. Even when we don't, we usually are 48 hours from resolution. I find that, sometimes the younger lawyers are like, oh, we didn't resolve. And I was like, well, where'd you end up? What were you doing? And I was like, just call the other lawyer. I was like, y'all, you guys don't realize that you're both in the same spot, and so a lot of times we can get it done. There's this guy now who's all over social media, and he's in the marketing space. He's in like the legal marketing space, and his motto is never split the difference. And he says, you're a loser no matter what you do when you split the difference. And I suppose I'll counter this with saying, I didn't read it, right? I was just reading the headlines. I watched the little clip of it. I really couldn't disagree more when someone says never split the difference, that someone's always giving up. And I really don't think that that's accurate. When I talk to my defense lawyer, so I want to hear your take on that, but I'll say the best part about being former defense, now plaintiff's lawyers, you can kind of see both sides. So I'll talk to my defense lawyer, and they're like, I couldn't believe he took X, Y, Z. And I said, that's because you don't realize that I guarantee you the case is not nearly as good. He knows something about that case that's awful, right? Where, sometimes, hey, we have clients in prison where I'm like, well, that's unfortunate, right? It's going to be making it awfully. I don't want to try a case with my client in a jumpsuit, right? Or so there are all like these elements, and they say, do you want to mediate a case? I'm like, sure. Why not? Because I was just thinking to myself, how the hell am I going to get my client through this mess? So what are your thoughts? Never split the difference.
Well, I don't think the difference matters at all. What matters is what is your case potentially worth versus what is it worth if things go south,
right?
Which happens when you go to court sometimes.
Yeah.
And both sides have their own beliefs as to what they're going to be able to prove. But I always ask people if they brought the crystal ball to tell me what the jury's going to decide.
Mm-hmm.
And I also point out that it's the 12 people on jury duty that weren't smart enough to get off of jury duty.
Right, that actually showed up that day.
That actually showed up, that are going to make a decision, as opposed to in a mediation, it's your decision and the insurance company's decision as to what they're willing to pay, that determines whether it can be resolved.
Right.
What amazes me is the fact that there are so many things that aren't known by both sides,
right,
that they do learn in a mediation, because that's the only informal opportunity to get together and talk about the facts of a case.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how when that happens, lights go off and people understand what might happen versus what they thought might happen beforehand.
Yeah.
So the system works. And, I used to think I was good because I settled a lot of cases that I mediated. But in reality, I'm just getting both sides to both do what they want to do to get it resolved, because it's very expensive to litigate.
Well, and that's the other side of the coin about splitting the difference. And I guess it depends on how far apart you are, right? So if you're splitting the difference and you're miles apart, but that's not reality. Whoever says that hasn't mediated that many cases. There was a time where I was not as a mediator, but we were mediating a case here, at least once a week, and I'd be being hauled all around town. And so we were mediating a lot of cases. But what I find is there's an opportunity cost. And so we'll get to a point where a lot of times I'll tell my client, look, we don't have to accept this offer, but here's how this is going to play out. I could probably get them up to kind of where we thought we kind of wanted to be. They've kind of got us in a weird spot. So in order to do that, I have to hire this expert. It's going to cost $15,000. And the expert's going to blow through the $15,000 before he even gives me any work product. It's bullshit. And then there's going to be like another $10,000. So what'll happen is, let's say, it's $25,000 on an expert. Let's say you're $50,000 off where you kind of wanted to be on the case. I'll make more money, because my percentage is going to go up. You, the client, are going to make less money because you're now footing the bill for this expert. And so that's when I start feeling like, okay, I don't love this. And now it's up to the client, So we'll have that conversation frequently with clients, or maybe sometimes the clients have an unrealistic expectation of what the case is worth. And so, well, hey, I'm going to do better, so that's fine by me. But understand, you're going to do worse. So unless we really want to try this case, which is also fine, but then here are the other things you need to know about. And so I say that because my biggest pet peeve is when I go to mediation and the defense attorney tells me I'm going to lose. I'm like, okay. If you really thought I was going to lose, you wouldn't be sitting here today.
Exactly.
Go file your motion. And it's always when the motion's sort of pending, right? They're like, you might lose. I've lost. We have a running tally. We know exactly how many summary judgments we've lost in 10 years. We know exactly how many trials we've lost in 10 years. That's not the issue. The issue for me and my perspective and my client's perspective is, what's it going to take to get there? And is that putting my client's interest first, or is that putting my selfishness first? And I don't want to do that. Certainly I want a bigger fee.
And the only thing that matters to just about every client I've run across is, what do I put in my pocket to take care of the future?
Right.
As opposed to, what might I possibly get if we go full bore. And the expense of litigation, as you know, and I mentioned to, I think, Melanie previously, the last case I tried, which was over 10 years ago, it cost me $41,000 out of my pocket to try it, and it worked because the jury liked my client, didn't dislike me, so ruled in his favor, fortunately, and so he ended up with more than what had been offered before, but it was still $41,000.
Yeah, minus 41,000, right?
And that could have gone south had the case not prevailed. Then, and that's the risk factor.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the defense had paid or spent over $200,000. So it applies to both sides as far as the costs.
Right.
And but at the end of the day, it depends upon what the client's putting in his pocket and what does it take to take care of the client. Because that's, you know, I did what you did for 40 years, had a blast, but I have a lot more fun not having to do it anymore.
The risk is not fun. So anybody who says they've never lost, like, that's bogus.
They haven't tried cases.
Right. I mean, you're going to lose some. We lost a summary judgment, I guess, mid last year, and I was pissed because we had sunk over 80 grand into this case. And I was very annoyed because there was in no universe were we ever going to beat that summary judgment.
Right.
And so we had to put in a few checks and balances here at the firm. It's like, all right, hold up. You can't just go spending $80,000 on something when we know we're not going to win. Because sometimes you never know, right? You know this, like a case comes in the door, it's a cherry case, it's perfect, means it's probably not very good at all.
There are no such cases.
Right. It's not. You just haven't seen all sides of it. Sometimes a case comes in the door and you think, I don't know, maybe, let's keep talking about it. Let me do some research. Let me give it some thought. And sometimes those cases, it can go either way, but sometimes they really balloon into huge cases. This was one of those like maybes. Okay, that was never going to go here. It was always going to go here. That the burden that we had to prove was impossible. Legally, I don't think it was very sound, but we were pretty far into it at that point, and it's very hard to sit a client down and be like, okay, we've been working on this for a few years now. Here's the motion. You're going to lose, right? Nobody likes to have that. You can't have that conversation with a positive ending. Very rarely. Maybe med-mal would be like probably the exception where you can get clients to really kind of understand that. Everybody else is like, no, you're a dirtbag.
Med-mal, very, very tough.
It's hard. So you can get them to kind of conceptualize that better.
The cards are stacked against you, generally speaking. So.
Right. And I find a lot of times those clients are the best because they truly don't understand what's happened. No one's going to tell them. The doctor won't tell them. They're at this hospital. Then this hospital says, well, we can't treat you anymore. We're going to ship you off to this hospital. And even they understand that there's something fishy about that. That something's just not right. You don't just get transferred to hospitals around town like that. So, so they're the ones. But everybody else. So, yeah, we lost. I was not happy about it. And so I think, it was a good lesson in financial management of files and making sure that when we're investing in a file that we're not just going through the motions and saying, oh, I need an industrial expert. Well, here, let's just go hire this guy and give him God knows what, just for him.
It's not cheap.
No, it's not. So, so that's also, that plays into it too, right? I mean, how much are you willing to invest? I get calls from maybe sometimes younger lawyers who say, hey, why don't you help me out on this case? And a lot of times it's because they can't finance the case because it is so expensive, if you need to hire the experts, et cetera. But so I like mediating cases, The only time I don't like mediating a case is when the mediation is really a ruse to see what your bottom line is.
And that's always a risk factor for both sides.
Sure.
The advantage to mediation is you can actually speak to your opponent directly.
Right.
And you can find out the issues that you may not be able to get formally by way of interrogatories and requests for production, because everybody automatically objects up front
Right.
justifiably or not. That's just the game that's played in litigation. In mediation, you can cut through a lot of that and actually learn what I refer to them as the warts, the difficulties in your case.
Right.
And, I mediate a lot of cases as an attorney. Some resolved, some didn't. Some went to trial afterwards. There is no right or wrong amount. There is an amount at the end of the day that the case is going to resolve for. And nobody knows, as you're going into a mediation, what you're ultimately going to get. And people that tell me, well, I can't lose.
Or you can lose.
You can always
You can say,
lose.
I don't care if I lose.
Or people that say, well, I'm not going to have to pay the plaintiff anything. They wouldn't be at the mediation if they really believe that.
Right.
So,
What was that verdict that just came out of the Western Louisiana for 400 something million dollars?
well, actually, $420 million for not against Blue Cross for not having paid the
And that one too.
the proper amounts. There are a lot of they're referred to as nuclear verdicts.
Yeah.
That are much larger than what usually happens, and there are also a lot of zero verdicts, much more so than in the past. But there aren't many cases tried, as you know.
Yeah.
Because most cases resolve because of the reasons we talked about, the expense of litigation. Sure. And the advantage to mediation is it's strictly voluntary, and if people don't get to where you need to be,
Just get up.
you move on.
Get your cookie first.
Make sure cookies come out at 2:00.
Right, get your
make
cookie.
sure you get your cookie, and then you shake hands and move on and get ready to go try your case.
Yeah. Wait, you know what? So where he mediates, they have I can't remember the name of it. One of the cookie machines that come out and they give you the hot.
Oh, she actually bakes the cookies.
She bakes them. Yeah, but it's like I saw it, right?
In the oven,
Yeah, in the
yes.
little oven box. And so the guys were all saying we needed one of those for the office. I was like, I don't know that you do. I don't know having a large format cookie oven is the best thing for the Chopin law firm.
I suggested a bar, but I haven't been able to convince the people in charge yet.
So you could probably get a lot more done that way than a cookie. That's the honey instead of vinegar method. I like that.
True story. Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
I had a mediation, and it was a contentious mediation, which isn't usual. And people basically stormed out around after about 4 or 5 hours. But I still, and the other side was a little shocked. Why did they just leave? And I said, well, I have their number, and I called them, and they were having margaritas. We got the case solved.
There you go.
Because they just had to settle down a little bit. I said, well, maybe if we had the margaritas at the office, we could take care of business quicker.
I've gotten votes on wine machines. They want the wine taps.
Well, sometimes it works the other way too. After a few drinks, people get fortified.
Well, maybe.
And then you can't settle the case. But it worked that day at least.
Yeah,
So.
maybe one margarita is okay. Maybe you might have to do the what's it, like the commander's martini rule, right? You just get 2. After that, you're
Remember
getting
they
cut
used
off.
to do the special with 25-cent martinis.
That's what I meant. Do they not do that?
Yeah, well, I used to bring a roll of quarters and put it on the table, and they'd just sort of shake their head. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that for a while I saw there was or maybe that was the place down here at Adelaide. So they used to have the two rule. You got 2, or they could do like the old rib room thing that would come in the huge. I don't know. It was like a martini for 4.
It's called a bucket.
Yeah, just keep pouring them. That's the old days. We don't do that anymore. Now we just eat like a salad at our desk. But
So you know what you don't do anymore also?
what's that?
In the old days, and I can speak having been through those, we used to get together with our opponent
Yeah.
and would go have lunch or would have after work drinks and talk about our case. That is very, very rare nowadays. And it worked because it's a lot more contentious now than it used to be, which is a shame because it is a business, but some people take it too personally. And fortunately, I've been on both sides. I've been in contentious cases. Remember, I did have cases with your dad.
Yeah, sure.
He was on the other side, hardworking defense attorney.
He's going to work
and,
it.
But it wasn't a situation where I couldn't see him later and say, "Hello, Dick, how you doing?" and share a drink with him, because life is too short otherwise.
Yeah, well, this is a cultural shift that I think really transcends the practice of law, but we're seeing the breakdown in the practice of law from this. But it's people I call, people are phone phobic, which is remarkable because they're glued to their phone, but they're phone phobic. And it's not the phone that's the issue, it's the conversation. And so people are moving so much more into a text-based style of communication. And so we text our clients. Our clients text us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's always remarkable when a client texts. You'll see texts come through at like midnight on a Sunday. They're like, I need to talk to you. I'm like, what? Absolutely not. When I say I'm always available, there's a caveat there. Or they'll call on a Sunday at 5 o'clock and be like, well, you didn't answer. I'm like, well, no shit. Doing what you're doing, right? Watching the Saints lose. Why would I be talking to you? So, but there's so people are moving into a text-based style of communication, and they're becoming a little, because it's a different style of communication, right? So you can alter the text, you can look at it, you can, you could see like the ellipse is coming, right? The text is coming. What are they going to say? And they're like, no, I want to say it this way. And you're able to craft the exact message you want to say, and you can't do that, when you're speaking to somebody. And so I notice myself do it too. So I don't even think it's, older people are texting too, but it's like, I don't want to talk on the phone. I just want you to text me. And I think it's a breakdown of communication in a lot of ways.
Do you text your wife when she's sitting on the sofa next to you?
I send her Instagram reels.
See?
Like we'll just sit there and send each other Instagram reels all night long until she gets mad.
Guilty.
Yeah. Sure, right? Yeah.
As opposed to just saying hello, I'll text hello or something.
Yeah.
And but it's the way we do it, which is a shame. But we're not going to change that.
No, that's never going anywhere, right? If anything, the old way, really, I don't know that that's going to come back. We talk about it a lot here is to like, okay, I know it's uncomfortable to have the conversation, but you sometimes you just have to, right? Especially with clients, and especially with opposing counsel, right? And so I agree. I still think that there's room in the business for drinks with opposing counsel to talk about the case or go on a lunch. It's just it's an unfortunate that we sort of get that sort of texting and that modality of communication sort of permeates into our lives in general. And so I find, like, for me, like my social circle is smaller than it was, when I first started practicing law. Actually, the best indicator is this. So when I first started working, I was at a defense firm. We were on the 45th floor of Plaza St. Charles. So a long elevator ride. And you're sitting in the elevator, and the iPhone didn't exist. And so you would talk to everybody in the elevator, right? You'd be like, hey, how's it going? What'd you do this weekend? I don't even know this person. I'm asking what they did this weekend, which is, normal. And they're telling you about their day. And then the next time you see them, you're like, hey, Bob, how'd that work out? How those kids doing? You walk into an elevator and people, they won't even make eye contact, right? Everyone like looks down as though I'm like Medusa or something. And again, like just as guilty as everybody else. It's very unhealthy. I think human beings are social by nature, is what defines us as being human, right? Is our the social aspect. And so I don't know. We could force it. I think we're just gonna have to force our way through the pain of doing it.
It's the way it should be done in New Orleans.
Right. Well, that's why we're here. Right? You could practice law anywhere. Generally, you go take another bar. It's better here.
It's got its problems, but it's I love the city, and it's not unusual to be able to strike a conversation with a stranger.
Sure.
People don't look at you as they would in New York as some sort of creep if you started talking to a stranger.
Right.
It can be done in New Orleans.
I think so.
But the problem is it's not done with opposing counsel enough, in my opinion.
Right. No, I agree with that.
And it makes a difference because I have mediation sometimes where opposing counsel haven't even met each other. The defense attorney sent his associate to take a deposition, and they've never really met. They've never looked at each other eye to eye and shaken hands, and it makes a huge difference. Once they do that, oftentimes all of the anxiety and the paranoia that exists in the practice of law slips away, and you can get the case resolved.
Right. And then you get to know each other better, right?
Right.
I mean, there's some law firms we seem to sue more than others. Well, we don't sue the law. They represent, like Walmart's probably the best example, without naming names. But I mean, where we have so many cases with them, we each know when each other's kind of full of it. We each know, you know where the barriers are because we've done it a million times. And so we can just be very frank about it. And be like, yeah, look, I hear what you're saying. I don't know that I agree with you, but I get it. I get your position, right? It's not a hard conversation.
And it makes it easier to get the case taken care of for the client.
Yeah, and we can usually, or not, or we'll kind of know, like, okay, this is one
That
where
you're
this
gonna be
is different. But we just had one of those, and Frankie, one of my super aggressive young trial lawyer who's chomping at the bit to he was an old prosecutor. So he's just dying to get in that courtroom. And even then, he's like, we're trying this case. I was like, all right, man, cool. He's like, and the number they threw out, he's like, are you telling me that your client wouldn't accept X? And X is excellent. And he's like, no way. And so I was like, Frankie, it sounds like if that's a no way, then you absolutely are trying this case. I was like, where is this case? He's like, well, it's in the Eastern District. I was like, okay, well, just so you know, X is pretty excellent, and the Eastern District is really unpredictable. In a lot of ways, it's just like you don't know which parish they're going to be pulling from, and you could be here, or you could be here, or you could be nowhere. And he was like, well, I was like, well, I'm not telling you not to try the case. Try the case. Absolutely. It's a great case. I love this case. They settled it within 24 hours for X, And actually, I was a little disappointed because then I was also thinking, great. Yes, you know what? If you're trying this case, I'm coming. I want to be there. I want to have a role in this too. And well, no more. It's gone. But I think New Orleans, you're right, is like such a tight community. I remember the first time I met you, you were mediating a case for us, but you had tried cases against my father. And Adam Sanderson's one of my partners. You've known Adam for a long time, and I believe Adam might have even worked with you for a short period of time too, right?
No, he worked at
Shahardy. Yeah.
No, at Mulla Bland.
Oh, well, of course, yeah.
And my daughter works with Mulla Bland.
Oh, is that how that? Okay,
yes.
Okay.
So, but he's friends with my niece and her husband. I think they went to Millsaps or Parkview up in Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And so they've known each other a long time. And Adam's a great guy. And
Adam's a great guy.
I'm glad he's with you because he does a good job. But I remember we mediated a case and got it resolved. Had some warts in it, as do most every case.
Sure.
But fortunately, after talking through them, the monies that they were willing to put up made sense to get your client taken care of.
Sure. Right.
Which is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Right. I mean, it's if I can make my client happy, we usually say, at the end of a mediation, everybody's a little bit unhappy, right? You got a little less than you wanted. You paid a little more than you wanted. Over the years, I've started to shift my view on that, and I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think contentment would be a better term. I think the resolution and then the contentment is probably a better way to view it.
That and the time limit, because if you don't get it settled, you're going to try it. Then you might be waiting a year, 2 years, 3 years to get it resolved, and that's another factor that comes into play. You get it resolved with an insurance company; they, by law, have to pay you within 30 days.
Right.
And it's amazing how that helps to heal people that are having problems when they've got the stress of litigation off their backs.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people
makes a difference.
They think that they want, clients, they think that they want to try the case. And I usually have to kind of remind them or educate them and say, listen, it's not fun being on the witness stand. You're not going to like it.
They call it a trial for a reason.
Right. I mean, it's a big deal. I mean, you're really going to dislike this. This is going to be very unpleasant for you. And I usually will tell them that at the outset anyways. That's what we're here for. And we're going to minimize all that anxiety. But I want you to know that this is nobody wants to do this, right? I mean, this is terrible.
What's the hardest part is after the case has been presented and you're waiting for the 12 people to tell you whether you were right
they agree with you or
wrong.
they don't. Yeah. They could be looking at you the whole time and they're thinking like you're a liar. and you're thinking they're like on your side.
And you can act like you're cool about it.
No, you're not.
But your stomach's churning.
Right. That's why I don't do criminal work. There's just no way. I don't think I could do it. At least maybe not on the defense, because I would just feel awful.
If somebody gets sentenced to life in prison or worse.
Yeah, right. I mean, so I don't know that takes real grit.
Here in New Orleans, they don't have to stay in jail long.
Not very long, few days.
I'm sorry I even said
days.
that.
Yeah,
Facts of life. So.
That's it. It's just a few. Everybody was on lockdown. Obviously, we're talking about the 11 inmates that escaped from New Orleans Parish Jail, and everyone's like, there's people saying they're fearful for their lives. It's dangerous. My kids' schools are texting me like, don't worry, we're on lockdown. And I kind of thought, guys, it's New Orleans. Does anyone going to notice 11 more armed criminals on the street? That's a drop in the bucket.
That's right.
I was like, that's like a pothole. You're saying you got 2 more potholes on the street.
And they're all trying to hide right now.
Yeah, I was like, this is probably the safest you've ever been.
For those at least.
I don't know. I saw one. I saw a video of it, and he took 200. I don't know what that means, but I assume that's a dosage, and was drinking a gallon of Costco-sized gallon thing of apple juice, which I'm intimately familiar with, of course. Always apple juice, and it's like, so that's what you did? You broke out of jail to do drugs and drink apple juice? You weren't even trying to escape. Like if it was like a Shawshank moment, right, where you're like, I'm out of here, and you just go running for Mexico or Canada, there's like that sentiment in Americans to always sort of root for the criminal, like the anti-hero. You're like, you know what, you crossed that border. But this guy, I was like, you just want to do drugs and drink apple juice.
I don't know if the 10 or 11 people that escaped were thinking that high.
Yeah, right.
They it's there, let's do it.
Or at least, I don't know, go out to dinner, for whatever the drugs cost, go get yourself a nice steak, go somewhere, that's how you'll know. So if I ever escape from prison, you're going to find me real fast. You're going to walk into a Ruth's Chris and we're like, I knew that son of a bitch would be here.
Different mindset, trust me. So.
It's not going to be for a gallon of apple juice. So, all right, well, hey, thanks for coming on the show.
Well,
I appreciate it. It was great catching up with you, talking about all the, trials or no trials. I agree with you on mediation. I do think it's the best way to resolve problems. It is sort of the ultimate gentleman's way of resolving our differences. If you can't punch it out in the ring, then maybe just talk it out in a conference room.
Or talk it out and then punch it out if you can't.
You do that too, right? There is always that possibility.
Correct.
But Pete Breslin at MAPS is available for your mediations today. Tell them how they can find you.
831-2141. Call MAPS. They've got my calendar.
There you go. All right.
I appreciate the gig and, enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining me today on Above the Legal Limit. If you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more about business and law, hit that subscribe button. If you didn't like the show, keep it to yourself. Remember, there's no limit to what we can achieve. We will see you next week. Until then, even though we're above the legal limit, let's drive safely. Cheers, everyone.